You have to go through a committee. It's not just me saying we're going to do it overnight. There is a process to actually do all that stuff. No-fault car insurance. I've been talking about this ever since I got a car back in 2002. We are the most expensive state in the nation, and we are double the national average. Something as simple as putting a mandate with hospitals, such as a fee schedule, is just one step at lowering the cost of auto insurance. So I'm not saying we have the silver bullet, but that's just one way of doing that. I do know back in 2010, Governor Snyder imposed a senior pension tax, and that was because of the lost decade under Governor Granholm. Well, now Michigan is currently in a surplus, and I believe that we should make efforts into reducing or eliminate the state income tax along with the senior pension tax, because that's our money. I believe that we know how to spend our own money versus Lansing. You can probably tell when it comes to, say, like the budget, if you will. Another thing I would like to address is when we pay taxes, the first thing it's supposed to go to is infrastructure and schools. And I feel like that's the last thing they kind of do. So if we're going to be concerned about our roads, let's do it right the first time. Let's do higher quality roads at first versus we keep fixing them every summer. Because, you know, here in Michigan, it's like you have winter, almost construction season, then it's construction season. I'm kind of over that. I don't know about you as well. But making a long story short, too, is I have been going door to door ever since I've been an elected precinct delegate since 2010. And I do believe that we need to lower our gas tax vehicle registration fees. But if you'd like to learn more about me, you can meet me outside, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about the issues furthermore and give you my personal phone number. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Orlando.
Thank you.
Well done. Our next candidate for the 90th District House of Representatives seat is Mr. Brad Slaw. Brad's a graduate of Zeeland High School and Hope College. He's worked 5 years as a Zeeland Township supervisor. He worked 10 years as the elected treasurer for Ottawa County. He is the former chairperson of the Ottawa County GOP. He spent 18 years working in the banking industry. He's married to his wife Carol for 32 years and has 3 grown children. He has memberships in numerous local and statewide organizations related to his various endeavors. He's a member of the First Reformed Church in Zeeland, and he's very committed to local control and government responsive to the voters. That's an ancient Republican concept that's been lost, so I hope that Brad brings it back if he gets elected. And he's the proud owner of, I believe, 5 sheep for their wool, which I just found out today. So without further ado, Mr. Brad Slaw.
Thanks, everybody. I am Bradley Slaw, the Republican candidate for the 90th House seat. As Steve mentioned, first Zeeland schools, then Hope College. I graduated with a business degree and certified to teach business and phys ed at the high school level. That just wasn't going to happen in 1981 when I graduated. There wasn't teaching jobs here in the state. So I got into the financial world, did some banking experience with FMB, First Michigan Bank, and then Byron Center State Bank. Really the deal that I came away from there was fiscal responsibility and then stewardship, both of the customer funds, but then also of the bank dollars and the customers that we actually had. So you have to be a steward of both the people and the assets. Had a chance to get into local government through Zeeland Township as a supervisor. Spent 5 years there, and then as the county treasurer up until now. Besides those positions, I am also a licensed realtor and the managing partner for a property management business. Throughout my career, I've really spent time and been given lots of opportunities to be in leadership. Many of those things have happened because I think of the stewardship and the way that I feel about taking care of things day after day. It goes as broad as an elder in my church to president of the Michigan Treasurers Association to chair of the Republican Party in Ottawa County. Why would you be interested in having me as your elected official? I think several things. One is I see my job as adding value to the process in Lansing and doing that while upholding the values of the 90th District and my own personal values. I truly do believe in local decision making. Having been a township supervisor, having been a county treasurer, I think there is much to doing that. obviously there has to be stuff that's done at a state level, so we can't just ignore that, but it's a both and. Education for all students, and we need to do that with equal dollars for per pupil, and then figure out what needs to happen besides that. And then infrastructure, our roads, our water, our sewer, but broadband is a piece of that as well. We really truly need to have broadband to be able to do business in our local units, as well as to be able to have opportunities for our children to be able to do homework from there. Over the last 2 weeks, I've really been honored to receive 3 different endorsements that I think speak to the values and character I intend to bring up. One is Right to Life, the second would be Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce, and the last would be the Farm Bureau. Just to remind you, I'm Bradley Slaw, candidate for the 90th House, and I would appreciate your support and your vote.
The next person that will be speaking is Patrick Kolbeck, who's running for governor of Michigan. Pat is a Republican candidate. He has over 2 decades of private sector experience and 2 terms in the Michigan Senate. He has a track record of taking on big challenges and succeeding. He has degrees in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan to design systems as an engineer with Boeing that enable people to live on the space station. He has also been an instructor at Space Camp, and he ran his own small business for 6 years. By running for the Michigan Senate, he became the first person elected directly to the Senate in over 3 decades without any political experience, and he defeated 4 former state representatives in the process. He's remained true to the principles which he promised voters to uphold. He's been recognized as the most conservative senator the past 2 years in a row and 3 times in his 7 years of service. He works hard to make Michigan the 24th right-to-work state in the nation. He received the Senator Paul Fannin Statesman of the Year Award, and his free market health care solutions at lower cost and improved services are nationally recognized and featured in Forbes magazine. He's also been honored as a Legislator of the Year by the Police Officers Association of Michigan, the Senior Alliance, and Associated Builders and Contractors. Without further ado, Pat Kolbeck.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's good to be out with Ottawa County Patriots. I think I've been out here quite a few times before we even had the idea of running for governor. We've talked about a lot of different issues together, haven't we? We've talked about, I think, the LGBTQ issue. I think we talked about we talked about the growth of the Muslim Brotherhood, and we also talked about one of my favorite subjects, which is free market health care. And I'm happy to say we've made a lot of progress, in particular around the free market health care subject here in the state of Michigan over the past few years. So as you might tell from that bio, I got a little bit different background than you see from a lot of folks up in Lansing. I've got this engineer problem-solving approach, but it's one that's buttressed by core principles that I think there's a lot of evidence that says that I stayed true to those principles since I first ran for office. One of the first things we did when I first ran for office was we put together this little compass I call the voting compass, and it asks 10 questions whenever a piece of legislation comes up. And those questions were consistent with my campaign lit when I first ran. So if you want to know how I got to be most conservative state senator on a pretty consistent basis, it's because I constantly recalibrated to what the voters told me to do, and I constantly kept in contact with the voters in my district. And very interactive on social media in particular. I want to make sure that they understand that, it's not a fire and forget missile here. This is a case where, no, I'm here to serve. And this is all about principled service. You'll hear a lot about the concept of principled solutions. And for me, that's very important. It's not good enough just to have any solution to a problem. I want to have principled solutions that reflect the values of the people that put me into office. Now, these principles are pretty straightforward, and it's important to talk about principles because if you know what's guiding me in my votes, you'll not only know how I address the policy issues of today, you're also going to understand how I address the policy issues of tomorrow. And these principles are pretty straightforward. Number one, government works for us, not the other way around. Some people have forgotten that up in Lansing and up in D.C. Number two, Constitution's supposed to be followed and respected, not ignored. I actually have colleagues, believe it or not, that say you don't have to worry about whether it's constitutional or not. Let the Supreme Court decide. And I go, well, why do we even take an oath of office then? Also, if we're going to do tax increases, they should always be the last option pursued, not the first option. Otherwise, you're just pushing off that prioritization discussion on the people that elected you into office. And last but not least is that you cannot have sustained fiscal prosperity in the absence of a moral and religious society. It just doesn't work. And I can give you a lot of evidence to support that, but most of us in this room understand that basic truth. So this is leading to a lot of principled solutions. And these solutions start first and foremost with the elimination of the state personal income tax and the senior pension tax right along with it. We're not talking about a little 0.3% reduction. We're talking about complete elimination. And here's why. I got 31,000 job openings right now in my district out in southeast Michigan. And I know it varies across the state. Sometimes some places we're still hurting. But in southeast Michigan, we're hurting for people. And when you look at the fastest growing states across the country, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, 0% income tax, 7% sales tax. If we're at 0% income tax, 6% sales tax, all of a sudden, all the folks we lost during the last decade under Jennifer Granholm are coming back. We can send invite letters back to our friends and family that are expats out of the state and bring them back into Michigan. The other thing that I'm very passionate about is fixing our roads. Right now, I'm not willing to put it in the same vernacular as Gretchen Whitmer does, but I get a little frustrated with it as well. But the key to fixing our roads is not by throwing more money at it. We have plenty of money, and just as evidence of that, when they passed that gas tax increase after the voters rejected the proposal one with 81% of the vote, when they passed one without a vote of the people, that increased it by $600 million, the taxes. Right afterwards, they repurposed $400 million in general fund money from the transportation budget to go backfill potholes in other areas of the budget. It was a bait and switch. The key is, when we build roads, we build them right the first time. If you build them to last longer, and I've got different construction techniques that are out there that cost about 15% more up front, but the roads last 3 to 4 times as long. If the roads are lasting longer, this is where the engineering mindset comes in, your total life cycle costs go down, not up. You don't need to increase taxes, you need to do it right the first time. That's another key thing. So auto insurance, you guys probably don't worry about that at all around here. So it's all right, our auto insurance is about twice what you see in the rest of the country, right? And I've got, and I said about solving that issue. One of the ways to solve the issue and what I focused on for a long time was addressing health care. Because if you look at your health care premium, about 70% of your auto insurance premium actually goes to health care. And I thought I was insuring a car. No, actually it's going into insuring health care, because it's about your personal injury protection and taking care of you when you've been injured in an auto accident, for example. So I've always focused on lowering the overall cost of health care services. If you do that, you're going to lower the premium requirements for your bill, for your premiums. And but there's something else that I started looking into. I want to be a little bit more aggressive and get more tangible on what kind of cost savings we can get. And what I did is started looking at my own insurance premium. And it turned out that about 58% of the cost of my own auto insurance premium deal with state mandates. You eliminate the state mandates, all of a sudden you're finding yourself where you've got options to actually lower the cost of your auto insurance bill by as much as 60%. When I examine it, I know I can get to a minimum of 40% without too much problem. The key is, to get it to the next 60%, it involves looking at the Michigan Catastrophic Fund. And that involves some cooperation with the federal government. It's a longer haul, but it is something that is indeed possible. So with me as governor, we can find a way to actually not be above the national average. We can actually find a way to get below the national average in the cost of auto insurance. Another thing I'm passionate about is healthcare. As you can tell, we've been out here a few times talking about it. I want to make Michigan the center of a free market healthcare revolution. And I've been recognized not just statewide for my expertise on this, but also at the federal level. If you go to Forbes.com, you'll find out that you type in my name in the search area, you're going to see some of the most popular articles on free market healthcare solutions anywhere in the country. And I also helped with the Trump transition team. I got together with free market healthcare experts all across the country to identify key director positions throughout Health and Human Services, so we would have friends in DC when we started pushing our healthcare reforms in the state. When it comes to education, obviously I want to get rid of Common Core, been the most vocal opponent to that in the state. And we've got a long work to do. Bottom line is, I'm sick and tired of spending more time on testing than actual instruction in the classroom. We got to get back to the point where we respect teachers and we respect the fact that we shouldn't have any interference in the classroom. It should be between parents, students, and teachers in the classroom. There's a lot of stuff to go on, but I'm pro-life, pro-God. I've been defending religious liberty more passionately than you'll find at any other elected official. We're always at making sure that people aren't playing games with our religious liberty. Pro-life, I have my Choose Life license plate bill, which was vetoed by Governor Snyder. Matter of fact, Governor Snyder's vetoed 2 out of the last 3 of my bills. In regards to gun rights, I'm a proponent of constitutional carry. I want to eliminate gun-free zones because the only people that like that are the folks who are interested in taking care of the fact that nobody's going to be firing back. I want them to be uncertain as to who that person might be. Now let's look forward in this upcoming election. Now these are all principled solutions, and you can tell that you're over the target when you're taking flack, right? And I've taken a lot of principled stands on a lot of different issues. One of them is on social studies standards. So how many of you believe that we're too conservative in our teaching inside the classroom, particularly in K through 12? I didn't see any hands go up. What's going on there? I don't know about you, but I looked at the standards that they were proposing back in 2015, and I saw that there was a political bent to those standards, and they were not politically neutral, nor were they accurate. So I actually went to some of the public forums and listened to what they had to say, and I said, not on my watch. And I went back and I identified 15 different issues that I had with those standards, and I proposed changes to those standards to the State Board of Ed and got 17 other legislators to co-sign on that. State Board of Ed responded by forming a focus groups. For the last 2 years, I was a member of a focus group. And mind you, unlike what the press is saying about this right now, I was outnumbered pretty much 20-1 from a worldview perspective on these standards. If you look at some of the press releases on these new standards, because we achieved compromises or agreements on all 15 of those issues, and I only had 2 requirements in the discussion. They had to be politically neutral and they had to be accurate. So all the pushback that you're seeing now is because there are people out there that don't want them to be accurate and they don't want them to be politically neutral. I got agreement with some people that were very, very progressive on the changes that we had. Because if they want to talk about progressive reform, then we're going to talk about conservative reform. If they want to talk about LGBT policy, then we were going to talk about religious conscience rights and how you shouldn't be violating them. If they want to talk about the rise of Islam, which, by the way, for decades, we've had a dedicated section on Islam in our social studies standards and no dedicated section on any other religion. How does that happen in a country founded on Judeo-Christian principles? Because we've been asleep at the wheel, right? So I wasn't asleep. I got engaged, and we actually got balance, finally, in these standards. That's what they're pushing back on right now. And it's kind of frustrating. They're saying that I sought to eliminate references to the KKK, Roe v. Wade, and all these other things. I want people to know the truth about KKK. I want them to know that it was a militant arm of the Democratic Party. They don't want people to know about that. I want people to talk about Roe v. Wade. I just want to also talk about some conservative cases as well, like the U.S. versus the Holy Church of the Holy Trinity back in 1892. It talks about us being a Christian nation. Oops, sorry, that's part of the Supreme Court record, but nobody wants to talk about that one. So I just want to have some balance. That's all I'm looking for. And right now, you can tell, like I said, when you're taking flack on these issues, you are over the target. These guys are going crazy on these topics. But it's up to you. There's a public comment period that's happening right now. Please engage and submit your comment on there in support of these standards. They're all in a tizzy. I even got, if you really want to know when you hit the big leagues on this stuff, I got Barbara Streisand tweeting out opposition to me. So you know I'm doing something right. There's other issues around Muslim Brotherhood. I think we talked about that in a lot of different areas. Because one of the gubernatorial candidates on the Democratic side, Dr. Abdul al-Sayed, has tangible ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, which the media, by the way, doesn't, they call it unsubstantiated, but when I went up to Nolan Finley, when my wife went up to Nolan Finley and said, here's the evidence, he says, I don't want to hear about it. They don't want to hear about this, guys. He's got tangible ties to an organization called the Muslim Students Association. He was vice president of that Students Association. Their credo, their pledge that they take is Allahu Akbar, jihad is my spirit, I will die to establish Islam. And when I called him out on that in front of 150 members of the Michigan Press Association, you know what his response was? You may not hate Muslims, but Muslims definitely hate you. How many press reports did you hear about his statement? How many headlines did you see on that? If I would have said that in reverse, and I would have said that about Christians, that would have been global news. Matter of fact, they probably would have been printing it out on the moon. But you know what? Not a peep. Any stories that did mention it were surrounded, and they were headlined with Colbeck bad, here's what else I had said, Colbeck bad. Fake news is exceedingly out, it is out there, guys. And I did a comparison of Google alerts on him a week after this and a Google alerts on me. For me, it's all Colbeck's anti-this, homophobic this, whatever the case may be, all phobic. Him, is he eligible to run for office? Not a blurb on this. This is ridiculous, guys. What they can't stand, whether it's social studies standards, whether or not it's Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization recognized by majority Muslim states, countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates, they do not want the truth getting out. And the thing about me is that I'm not afraid of telling the truth. I've done my research, and I will testify to that truth. And I will testify it anywhere we need to go. Matter of fact, I'm the only Republican gubernatorial candidate that accepted the challenge to go to Detroit and a debate in Detroit and take on 3 Democratic gubernatorial candidates in a church like this, except there are about 2,000 people there. And most of them were not friendly to conservative ideals. But I didn't change my message because of where I was. Matter of fact, a lot of people afterwards came up to me and said, we appreciate your boldness in coming out here and being kind, being firm, but being frank. I did the same thing. I was the only Republican gubernatorial candidate in over 38 years to actually go to the Michigan Association of Government Employees. That's the AFSCME, AFL-CIO, SEIU folks. And we talked about right to work. We talked about my role in right to work. We talked about pensions. And you know what? I was very well received there. Matter of fact, after I was done, I had people running out to say, how could they help out with my campaign? We've had people looking up in Stillman, Michigan, up in the UP, that saw a friend of mine with a Colbeck bumper sticker on at a gas station, ran up to him and said, that's my guy, that's who I'm voting for. He goes, well, really? Yeah. And it's not just me. It's all the members of my GM UAW local. And they told us to vote for Hillary last election. We all voted for Trump. They told us to vote for Gretchen this time. We're voting for Colbeck. Guys, there is something very special in our campaign right now. It is Republicans, independents, and Democrats are all sick of politics as usual. We cannot afford to elect a politics as usual candidate as our Republican candidate in the in the general election. It just will not work, guys. And I can just end with one note here. There's a lot of people that are paying attention to bank account balances, not vote counts. I'm telling you, we just won a poll yesterday in the 11th Congressional District, which is where I reside. 60% of the vote went to Colbeck, 25% went to Schuette. Guys, if people are trying to suppress discussion of us winning this, we're going to have one heck of a surprise on August 7th. And in order to make that happen, though, we need your support. So please go to colbeckforgovernor.com. We got yard signs out in the back. We could use all your support. God bless you guys. And thank you, Steve, for keeping the message going here at Ottawa County Patriots. Knock them alive, everybody. And by the way, just one thing. Unfortunately, I got to get up at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. So usually I'm like the last one out of every one of these events. Tonight, I'm kind of going to make an exception, okay? So apologies for that, but I've seen a lot of you guys before and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you guys very much.
The next speaker is Justin Roebuck, who is the Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds. A few years ago, they combined those offices together. He was elected in 2016 as the Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds. He currently serves as the Clerk of Michigan's 20th Circuit Court and Clerk of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. He is the Chief Election Officer for Ottawa County, overseeing the election process in 23 local cities and townships for the county's 195,000 registered voters. As county clerk, his responsibilities include maintaining all vital statistics of the county including birth, marriage, and death records, and as Register of Deeds for the recording of deeds, mortgages, liens, foreclosures, and all other public documents pertaining to real property. Justin has made customer service his #1 priority. The Clerk Register's Office continues to be a leader in the field of technology, utilizing electronic filing, processes in the Register of Deeds and courts, online applications with our elections, and vital records division, and the digital scanning, indexing, and storage of documents throughout the department. He's a graduate of Hillsdale College, so you know he knows the Constitution. Not the modified version. With a degree in history and political science, he resides in Zeeland with his wife Laura, daughter Sarah, and son Michael, and is an active member of the Engedi Church in Holland. Without further ado, Mr. Justin Roback.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think this is a really important forum today as we're talking about who will be the next chief election officer in the state of Michigan. And Steve and I were talking about a month ago or so, and he asked me if I would be willing to come and share a little bit about what we are doing here in Ottawa County, particularly in the realm of election security. And I think it's a great opportunity to kind of preface the conversation that we're going to have with our Secretary of State candidates for sure. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Basically, and thanks for helping with the PowerPoint too, Gene, if he's back there. I gave you a little bit of a handout. I'm going to try to be real quick because I do want to get to these candidates and hear what they have to say as well. But really beginning in the 2016 cycle, we became more and more aware of the reality that in voters' minds, we have a problem with trust in our election system. We just do across the board, whether it's coming from the liberal end of the political spectrum or the conservative end of the political spectrum. There's a diverse distrust of our process, and I think it's so important that we address that. As your county clerk and the chief election officer in your county, I owe it to you guys to talk to you guys about what we're doing to safeguard the elections process. And so a little bit about us. We, oops, sorry, I don't know where I'm at. I'm on the second slide, Gene, sorry. 23 local jurisdictions. We have just under 200,000 registered voters. 111 precincts. Ottawa County is the second largest purchaser of election equipment in the state of Michigan. Ottawa is a little bit unique because in 80 of 83 Michigan counties, the local units of government purchase the equipment. In Ottawa County, the county owns and maintains a central pool of election equipment. And the difference there is that so we're second to the city of Detroit in terms of the number of election equipment that we service. And incidentally, I want to introduce Stephen Deitch is here tonight too. He is my elections director and works directly with me. Steve really is charged with the administration of the election process in Ottawa County. He does a fantastic job of that as well. So we also have great voter participation here, 10% above the statewide average in a normal election cycle. So if the statewide average is 20%, typically Ottawa County's got about a 30% turnout in any given election. That's typically the case. And you know, I'm proud of that as your county clerk for sure. The reality though is we've come to the place where we know we have to put an active plan together to protect our elections process, and we do that on a number of fronts. And so as we've sat down and realized what are our top threats, what are the top threats and vulnerabilities that we face in the election security realm, physical access to our voting equipment is very important, and that can be a loophole where somebody could get in. Voter registration tampering, whether that's breach of information, malware, hacking, influence of foreign states. What is the level of influence that a foreign state is going to have, or what role do they play in this process? Physical threats such as terrorist attack, things that can happen during an election day that could really, really alter. You could see where somebody really wanting to disrupt the process could do so on election day and really harm how we go about choosing our government. And so these are things that we need to be thinking about. But honestly, some things like natural disasters. What's our emergency plan for a natural disaster, for a gas leak or a tornado, power outage? And voter fraud. We need to look at ways, what are the loopholes, where are the vulnerabilities that we have where individuals or groups of individuals may be able to take advantage of any kind of a system weakness. So that is really the beginning and the crux of our plan. And as we move forward, we have to have an identified plan for each of those topics. In 2016, the federal government finally kind of recognized elections as what we call critical infrastructure. So Department of Homeland Security now has election infrastructure on their list of critical infrastructure in the country. When you think about roads and bridges, those are pretty important. So is the way that we choose our elected leaders. And so we have to have plans there. So what really does that look like? Basically, what they view election infrastructure is voter registration systems, IT systems that handle voter registration, storage facilities for election and voting infrastructure, and polling places. Now, the federal government really doesn't have charge of our election process at all. There is no such thing as a federal election. Elections are truly an animal of the state. It's a very federalist type of election system, and that can be a really healthy thing in a lot of ways. Michigan is very unique in that we are far more decentralized than most states. Michigan and Wisconsin are the only two of 50 states that where elections are actually controlled at the local level. So the cities and townships really run the elections, and we as the county work kind of in conjunction with our city and township clerks. But in 48 other states, it's the counties that run the election. So, practically speaking, what that looks like is we have about 1,500 election officials where we could have only 83. So there's some positives to that. There's a lot of decentralization. It would be really hard to, bribe and manipulate that many people. There's also some real negatives to that in the sense that it's hard to control a message. It's hard to make sure that everyone is on the same page. The training element itself is huge. So anyway, those are the kind of things that we face, but DHS basically doesn't have a whole lot of control at this point over it. They are an advisory role for us. And so really it's our job, and my job as the election officer here for the county, and the local clerk's job to step up our game on this. So just briefly, election, the next slide talks about some security safeguards that we already have. And I want to say Michigan really is a great system overall. Do we have problems? Do we have issues with our elections? Sure, everywhere does. It's a human process. There are ways that we can improve, but we do have some pretty long-standing practices here in the state of Michigan that ensure accuracy and integrity in our system. One is a very detailed and thorough canvassing process. So after election night, after those unofficial results come out, after everything goes on, thanks Linda, we basically take it a step-by-step audit process of the entire thing. It's done by a 4-member group, bipartisan group of individuals who literally go through the poll book and do an audit. How many ballots were in this precinct? How many voters were on the totals tape? Did everyone sign what they were supposed to sign? Did they verify things? How was it sealed up? So that happens for days after the election when some of our friends think that we're resting up and sleeping after a hard season. We're still working. Public accuracy testing, that's huge. We test every machine. Steve and I were out today, all day, testing the equipment prior to the August election. We run a series of tests on it to make sure that the machines are functioning properly and counting properly. Precincts open to the public. It's your space on election day, and nothing is being hidden. You can observe and watch and oversee the entire process. Anybody can. So that's an important piece of our process. And then post-election audits are really critical. Secretary Johnson, I give her credit for This is something that we have been encouraging her to do for a while now, and that is add a manual hand count to the post-election audit. So that's another great piece of that. So I'm not going to take a whole lot more of your time. We do have a plan, and it's in here in the next couple of slides. You can kind of see just a basic outline of some of the things, the steps that we are taking and how we're approaching election security. But again, we live in a great place, and I think it behooves us to really think about this election for Secretary of State and to say, you know, where is that experience coming from in terms of the realm of security? You know, who can best safeguard our system? Because it's a reality, and we're fortunate that it hasn't happened in a large scale, but there are vulnerabilities there that we need to be aware of, and we need to make sure that we're protecting. So my contact information's here too. I know most of you guys, so it's good to see you, but I welcome any comments or questions that you guys have. We're always available to talk. So thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to hearing from the candidates too. Thanks, Steve.
We'll have Justin back at another time and give him a bit more time to go over and develop this, because it is important to hear from your county clerk on how things are done and what kind of safeguards are in place. And you did a really good job in a very limited period of time to kind of give you an overview, but we'll bring him back for more detailed presentation and more questions and answers at a future time. Next, we're going to get into a stretch here where we're going to be featuring the Secretary of State candidates. And as Justin mentioned, this is a very important position. How many people in the audience are GOP precinct delegates? Raise your hand. Okay. You are probably aware that at the state convention, if you get there, you get to pick the GOP candidate for Secretary of State, the GOP candidate for Attorney General, and the GOP candidate for Lieutenant Governor. So it's really important to focus on these three folks. And next month we have another forum. I've got some flyers right down on this table in front here for our July 17th candidate forum, which will feature candidates for Attorney General and the four candidates that are running for the Senate seat being vacated by Arlen Meekoff. So I encourage you to check our website, grab a flyer before you leave tonight, but these candidate forums are very important. Our next speaker is Mr. Stan Grote, who's running for Secretary of State in Michigan. And Stan has a lot of his materials here on his table out front. He's currently the Shelby Township Clerk. He is post-president of Macomb County Clerks Association. He also worked as a constituent relations representative for the Attorney General's Office of Southeast Michigan. He served as Michigan Assistant Secretary of State from 1994 to 2002. He's the former Macomb County Deputy Treasurer and the former Macomb County Commissioner. He also was a Sterling Heights City Councilman from 1986 to 1990. Stan also has been a successful small business owner and worked as a master mechanic, machine repairman, and supervisor in manufacturing engineering at a GM plant for 11 years. He has spent over 25 years as a leader in government and is a dedicated public service who is committed to balancing budgets and getting the most out of every dollar, something that's very popular in Ottawa County. Without further ado, Mr. Stan Grote.
Okay, I gotta be nice to her then. Good evening, everybody. How many Trump supporters we got in the room? Well, let me just say this. Thank God for Donald J. Trump, since we are in church. Thank God for Ottawa County patriots. Donald Trump is making America great again. You guys keeping your politicians honest. And how do I know that? Because I'm one of you. I was a co-founder of Romeo Area Tea Party in Macomb County, about 1,000 members at one time. Our government put many of our members, including I think some of you, through hell. Some of our members were audited, harassed. Some of them actually quit because they were afraid. What were they afraid of? Our own government. Our citizens afraid of their own government, folks. That's like in Soviet Union. There was scary stuff. The Tea Party, our Tea Party, Macomb County fell apart when our chair passed away. So just a fragile old lady. And what a leader she was, just like many of you here. She kept everything together. She kept those politicians on their toes, including local politicians, including congresspeople. And believe it or not, they were afraid. They were very nice when she walked in the room. So she kept everybody honest. And I'm sure that's what you're doing. And first of all, thank you very much for taking your time out and being here this afternoon. It is so important that every one of you is engaged and involved. Because if you take your eyes off the ball, there's no one out there. There is no citizens' lobbies. There are hundreds of lobbyists loaded with money, with Brinks trucks following them to Washington, D.C., and Lansing. Yes, Lansing. Influence, folks. Buying influence. This is why it's so important for every one of you here to be involved. It's absolutely crucial. So let me talk to you a little bit about me. I have a job. I am Shelby Township Clerk. Been there 6.5 years. I still got 2 years to go. Have a great job. Well, great benefits, good wages. Only miles away from my house in Shelby Township. But after 2016, with my knowledge and experience, I realized I can do more. I don't need a job. Not like other people running to get a job. I'm running to do a job. So, you got a piece of literature out there. A year and a half ago, I put a plan together. That's from experience, from knowing elections. Your county clerk mentioned, did a great presentation, Justin. Thank you very much. We met, we know each other. It's the local clerk that run elections. It's not the county. It's not Secretary of State. We run elections. I know elections. I run 2, 3, sometimes 4 elections a year for the last 6 years. We test the equipment. Everything's done at the local level. We store the data in our office. The absentee ballots are sent out from our office. They come back to our office. I tell a lot of people that local clerks, they are like gods when it comes to elections. They have total control of the elections. What the county does, what Secretary of State does, it's oversee the elections. But everything is conducted at the local level. So my plan is very simple. Again, speaking from experience, customer service. You people don't need us if we don't provide good service for you. You're paying us. We work for you. You should receive the best possible service when you come see me or Secretary of State at the least possible cost, with the least rules and regulations. Cybersecurity. I'm also a voting member in Shelby Township, Board of Trustees, and I have a department under me, IT department, 5 people, to make sure that all the data in Shelby Township is secure. Population 85,000. I tell people I'm just a small community. I have 58,000 registered voters, and I have 30 precinct locations on election day. And I employ about 350 people on election day, one day. Of course, with compensation to those people. And I would encourage many of you, please get involved. Sign up to be a worker on election day. Your county clerk will assist you with that and will tell you who really needs election workers. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret. Everybody does. It's very difficult to find good election workers. Don't let anybody fool you that Secretary of State is going to hire those people for you. They won't. It's the local clerk that hires those people and trains them. So on election day, everybody is up and running at 7 o'clock, happy, smiling, and I tell my workers, you better smile on election day. Because my bosses come to see me once a year, or twice or 3 times, and I better be on my top game, folks. So, experience. Steve mentioned a lot of good things. You probably thought this guy cannot hold a job with all the positions I had. But the thing is, I held some elected positions, appointed positions. I've been appointed by few very important people because I know the job. I have a lot of experience. Customer service. I ran my own business, had my own restaurant. I worked for General Motors. Thank Jimmy Carter for me being laid off when the economy tanked. I never forgive that man for that. See, I'm Polish-German. And I think that's German part in me, that it's unforgiving. I had great career going with General Motors. They sent me to school. I was already 6th level in management. And one day my boss came and said, well, you're the youngest kid, you're the youngest supervisor. We're going to send you back to production. I couldn't accept that. So I opened my own restaurant. I employ my family and a few of my friends. We had a ball, and I was making money like crazy. It's a tough business. And I tell people, if you don't provide good customer service, you don't eat. Well, same thing with this kind of, you won't need me to be there, look good behind the counter if you come in and I can't serve you. So let me talk to you about the equipment, public accuracy test. On my plan, I put this in here. Your clerk knows that, but I bet you none of you do. And I don't think any of my opponents will tell you that, because this is something that only if you're involved with election process you would know. It's public accuracy test in Detroit. 2016 was a mess in Detroit, folks. How many of you went to Detroit for recount? Yeah, 2/3 of the votes 2/3 of the boxes were not recountable. 2/3 of the precincts in Detroit have more people voting than people living in those precincts, folks. That's the fact. So accuracy test, we had some old equipment, but we all had the same equipment in Michigan. So Detroit clerk always blame equipment. The equipment is not functioning properly. Well, we got new equipment, folks, last year. So she can't blame equipment anymore. We'll see what happens. The last election was tested by the company. So it was great. No equipment problem. This year, she's going to have to test that equipment herself over and over and over. You run hundreds of ballots through each machine to test the equipment and make sure on election day everything clicks. We'll see what happens in Detroit. Because you can't blame equipment. It's a new equipment. But you got Hart, we got ES&S. There's 3 companies in Michigan. And we do have a paper ballots. I know there's a lot of question. Ask. 3 minutes, thank you. Paper ballots. We do have paper ballots. So there's a trail of, if you want to recount. A couple other things, and I'm gonna finish. One of my point on my plan is to require citizenship when you're registering to vote. Proof of citizenship. I know you Tea Party members can relate to that. You do not want anybody that is not a citizen to vote in elections, do you? You don't. Well, what's wrong with requiring proof of citizenship for the new voters registering? Passport or birth certificate. Very simple. And I said, thank God for Donald Trump, because what happened in Supreme Court today? Supreme Court upheld travel ban that our president put in place. What a great president. He's going to go down in history as one of the greatest presidents, I think. Photo ID. I would say you don't show your photo ID. It doesn't have to be licensed. It could be passport. It could be military. It could be a document. It could be state ID. You don't show the ID, you're not going to get the ballot. 16,000 people voted in 2016 without showing photo ID. Trump won by how many votes? 10,000? Folks, it was close. Detroit, 2/3 of the ballot boxes could not be recountable because the seals were broken. How the heck in the world, over 280 boxes, ballot boxes, the seal was broken? What happened? That's right. That is right. It was done on purpose because they didn't want you, when you were recounting, to see what's in that box. You didn't know if it was 300 votes, ballots, 60 ballots, whatever. And how many of you believe that dead people are voting? They are. Somebody's voting on their behalf, folks. 2/3 of people, voters in Detroit, is more than people living in Detroit, in those precincts. 60% of the counties in Michigan have more registered voters than actually residents living there. Talking about voters' integrity, year and a half ago, I put this together, voters' integrity. From experience, I put this in writing. You're not going to get this from anyone else. Time's up. Thank you very much. God bless everybody. I'm looking forward to your good questions. I know you're going to have some questions, so looking forward to it. God bless you.
Stan raised an interesting point. It's always amazed me that when people die, they convert to the Democratic Party. And I've never quite figured that out, but it seems to be the case with my relatives in Chicago and elsewhere that there's after-death conversion, so we know there's a lot going on in the afterlife. Next candidate is Mary Tretter-Lang. Mary is also running for Secretary of State. She's had over 30 years of success in computer security, business development, executive leadership, and managerial sales, operational and financial arenas. She has a positive entrepreneurial spirit. She got a bachelor's degree at both accounting and marketing from the University of Dayton. She began her career at KPMG, where she specialized in financial institutions, not-for-profits, and mergers and acquisitions. She also spent 5 years in various management positions at SBC Ameritech, where she also was involved in computer security and became a recognized expert in the area among the Bell operating companies. In 2013, Mary entered the public sector when she started at Vista Maria as Vice President of Development Programs. Throughout the years, Mary has provided a consulting service focusing on business development, branding, and marketing solutions. And she's also a master connector in networking and introducing professionals. In 2012, she received the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants Emerging Leadership Award. In 2008, Mary defeated 5 candidates to win the Republican nomination for the 1st District State House, but unfortunately, in that wave election, she couldn't win the general. She's been active in Republican politics, serving as a precinct delegate, raising money for candidates, and served as a member of the state committee where she chaired the budget committee. She's also a member of St. Paul's Catholic Church, the Fraternal Order of Police, and the Grosse Pointe Chamber, and past Commodore of the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club. She has been married happily to Paul Lang for 32 years, and she's raised 3 children and has recently welcomed a son-in-law into their family. Without further ado, Mary Tretter-Lang.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. And just to roll off of the last portion of my introduction, yes, I'm proud to be married to my husband, Paul, for 32 years. It'll be 33 in October. Our oldest daughter is married, and that's how we acquired our son-in-law. And with delight, I have a big smirk on my face because we are expecting our first grandchild in the beginning of October. And so we're continuing that forward momentum of Michiganders, and I think it's the 6th generation for myself, or we'll be introducing the 6th generation here in Michigan. So God bless, and we're looking forward to that time period. So part of my introduction, you heard talk about 10 years ago when I ran for state rep. And that last decade of the Jennifer Granholm years is so vivid, and that's why I ran back then, is to make a difference for the state and to take that leadership to up in Lansing. I was surrounded back then, and which most of you might have been, your neighbors were losing their jobs, homes were being foreclosed on, the economy was tanking here. That lost decade is in our rearview mirror, and I really want to keep it there. And I'm running to make sure that it stays there and that we move the state forward in the right direction. Governor Schneider and his team, the legislators, Pat Colbeck just left, but they've done a phenomenal job the last 8 years. And we truly are a comeback state. The economic growth has been extraordinary since 2009. We've become a contender. We have jobs. Our property values are increasing. Productivity is increasing. It's been phenomenal. And best of all, Michiganders are moving back to the state. My friends and their children and their grandchildren are coming back. It's delightful. But there's a threat to this comeback, and that threat is who I'm running against in November. That's Jocelyn Benson. That name sound familiar? She's the individual that ran 7.5 years ago against Ruth Johnson and only lost by 6 percentage points. She is using the Secretary of State's office as a stepping stone to become a governor. Another Jennifer Granholm in the makings. We have to put a stop to this and a stop to her liberal George Soros buddy that is planning on supporting her candidacy, and has already. This is why we need a Republican that is conservative, that is pro-life, supports the Second Amendment, and leads with integrity. I am a CPA with over 30 years in the private industry, and yes, I've ran many divisions in executive leaderships with computer security, business, finance. My CPA license is out on Laura. License, write this down, 1101015831. Yes, I am a registered CPA, and I'm proud of that. My experience as a CPA has given me the opportunity to give back to the state of Michigan. Governor Schneider appointed me a regent at Eastern Michigan University. He did that right after Eastern, and 2011 did a 000, zero increase in tuition, room, and board. He asked me and appointed me as a regent. He said, Mary, we need a CPA there. They need to address their financial situation. And yes, as a regent, we had to increase tuition. And yes, there had to be some changes, and there had to be some significant reductions. But this is called fiscal responsibility. Eastern is the second oldest public university in the state. It is the oldest teaching university. There's many students, 25,000, that rely on an education there. And yes, we had to roll up our sleeves. Did I want to increase tuition? No. Did we have to make those serious cutbacks? And did I not want to? You're right, I did not. But it had to. And I am proud of the work that I did there at Eastern and kept one of the finest institutions in the state here and moving along as it is today. And I'm proud that the governor sought me and my expertise to appoint me there to make a difference and keep EMU alive. I have over 15 years in computer security. I ran the Meritech district in computer security well before computer security was even a buzzword in our households. I thought out of the box and I hired personnel in order to show the vulnerabilities at Ameritech. And I shared that information with the regional Bell operating companies. We were one of the first that used encrypted logons into our computers after we showed what could be done and tampered with in the computers in the telecommunication industry. We utilized white hackers before there were white hackers even known. This is 20 years ago. That's the out-of-the-box thinking that I will bring to the office as the next Secretary of State. These are the same hackers that the DTMB, the Department of Technology and Management and Budget, use today to protect our vulnerable systems here with the state of Michigan. The campaign for the Secretary of State is a serious business. The next Secretary of State will define the political lines of our future here. And it's a $250 million budget that I'll be managing. And we collect over $2.5 billion in fees every year. This is a big-time operation. And that's where I say in my platform, it's the modern-day set of skills that are necessary to drive us forward as a great state. I pride myself as running a positive campaign focused on security, optimization, and stability. And that has not changed from day one. Please go out to my website and you'll see the consistency and the deliverables of that. But we as Republicans can all agree that yes, you should show a mandatory photo ID to vote. And yes, we need to remove illegal voters that are recorded in multiple states or deceased. And yes, we should require U.S. citizenship. That's our basis of being Republicans. But my platform of one citizen, one vote was built off the great work of our Secretary Ruth Johnson. I will increase the training for the clerks and the poll workers. I will make sure that the poll workers 30 days out have a certificate to work as poll workers at each of the respective election precincts. I will recruit additional poll workers for those understaffed precincts, which was a key problem in the city of Detroit and some of our other key areas. I will recruit these individuals from business community, from libraries, colleges, and even service organizations. And I will continue to clean up the voter rolls. I will join ERIC, which is a coalition of states that provides information amongst the states that are, for those individuals that are registered in multiple states. And I will forge partnerships with all the Secretary of States throughout the nation and remove those voters that are recorded and voting in other states multiple times. I will utilize my skills in computer security to make sure that we have fair elections and that we keep those voter files clean. And speaking of Ruth Johnson, I just want to applaud her, some of her accomplishments. She introduced the Social Security cleanup of those deceased voters. She did it twice a month, and she now has put it into legislature. Back in April, the governor signed it. The next secretary will do it once a month, and cleaning up with Social Securities and removing deceased. Myself, with my computer background, there's no reason we can't do it every single day so the clerks at any given point have a clean, reconciled file. She also has done well over 15 post-election audits. Justin acknowledged that and what she has done in that arena. And she also has participated in the interstate cross-check, which is similar to ERIC, where you remove individuals that are voting in multiple states. But I think we'll all agree that the wait lines in the branch offices are astronomical and they're too long. And I am a proponent to use today's technology to reduce those wait times in line. And my motto, respect your time in line. And that's increasing the online services that we have today, broadening and expanding the transactions so that you could do more transactions, and also updating it to make sure it's user-friendly. Introducing an SOS app on your phone. If you want to do transactions with the Secretary of State, you can do them on the phone. Broadening and expanding my time so that you can get a placement in line while you're running errands and come back and be served. And placing kiosks in Michigan-based businesses like Myers so that you can do transactions 24/7 in a retail environment and not have to wait for the branches to open. And delivering customer service so that every branch you're experienced in the same manner with a friendly greeting and everyone is trained in the same way, including cybersecurity for that matter. So today needs modern day technology. We need a modern day Secretary of State. I will incorporate the technology that we use in our everyday life. I am by far the hardest working candidate out there for Secretary of State, and I'm proud of that because that's giving you the example of the work level and the ethics that you'll get out of me as your next Secretary of State. And finally, I want to say I'm proud of the endorsements that I've received along the way. Some of you right here in the audience, including your county clerk, Justin, has endorsed my candidacy. I'm also honored and proud to have the endorsement of two of our former Secretary of States. Both Terry Lynn Land and Candace Miller have endorsed my candidacy. Why, you ask? First, everyone is always impressed that they are endorsing my candidacy, but you ask why? Because they know from day one I can do the job. They know that my platform of security, optimization, and stability is exactly what we need to drive our state forward as the next Secretary of State. I am proud of the state of Michigan. I am passionate to serve as your next Secretary of State. I'm doing this not for a job. I'm not doing this for political reasons. I'm doing this to get elected, serve 2 terms, 4-year terms, a total of 8, just as Candace, Terry Lynn, and Ruth have done, and delivered results for our state to move us forward in the right direction and to ensure that we keep this economic, healthy Michigan in place and that we continue to build on our generations here in the state of Michigan. I thank all of you for the great work that you've done for the Republican Party, but most importantly, for all that you've done for President Trump. And one thing, since I haven't run out of minutes yet, that I didn't give an accolade for Ruth Johnson. She removed over 500,000 deceased voters before the 2016 election. Let's clap. 500,000, and we took this state by 10,704 votes. And we finally turned this state red, and we have President Trump in there delivering results. God bless her for having the wherewithal, the knowledge, and the fortitude to do what is necessary and roll up the sleeves. That's exactly what you'll get from me as the next Secretary of State. I'm not afraid to roll up the sleeves, and I'm not afraid to go up against that Jocelyn Benson and send her away as a 3-time loser. She ran for Secretary of State, she ran for Supreme Court, and now she's running again for Secretary of State, and send her away. God bless you all. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'll be hanging around afterwards, too, to get to know you much more.
That's impressive. She didn't use all her time. That's efficiency. Before we introduce the next candidate, George and Ray, would you pass out those 3x5 cards? If you want to ask a question, we've got 3x5 file cards. You can start thinking of your questions. We got extra pens if you need them. And George and Ray, the ushers, will just raise your hand and they'll get you a card. And if you need a pen, they'll get that for you also. And so you can start thinking toward our Q&A period where you get to ask questions of the candidates. We're going to have them seated right down here in front. They'll share the microphone, and you can query them any questions that you think are pertinent and important. So they'll take care of that right now. And just hold your hand up, and George and Ray will get you a card for asking questions. And Dr. Dykstra is going to review the cards and take care of duplicates and so forth, and make sure that we have good, cogent questions. The next candidate that's running for Secretary of State is Mr. Joseph Guzman. He is a faculty member of the Department of Human Resources and Labor Relations at Michigan State University. Dr. Guzman holds a PhD in economic analysis and policy from Stanford's Graduate School of Business and advanced degrees in economics, statistics, and business research from Stanford University, together with MBA and undergraduate engineering degrees from the University of Arizona. Have you ever got your student loans paid off? Just wondering. Dr. Guzman served as a Michigan co-chair of the Trump campaign and as a national elector for the state of Michigan. He also is a Republican precinct delegate from Ingham County. Dr. Guzman is a member of Senator Orrin Hatch's Hispanic Outreach Finance Committee. He served 2 terms as an elected school board member and did work at the Pentagon, including serving as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy in the Office of Financial Management and Comptroller. Dr. Guzman was twice awarded civilian service medals in recognition of his contributions to the Department of Defense. He also served as a think tank economist with the Center for Naval Analysis and the RAND Corporation, both federally funded research and development centers. He's been named to the top 100 Hispanic influentials list and one of 10 to watch by Hispanic Business Magazine. Most recently, Dr. Guzman received the 2015 Michigan Educator of the Year Award from the Michigan Civil Rights Board Hispanic Latino Commission. Dr. Guzman and Mrs. Guzman, his bride of 25 years, live in Okemos, Michigan, where together they're dedicated to raising and educating their 5 beautiful children. Without further ado, Mr. Joseph Guzman.
Just to even out the visuals here, how about if I do this? Is this okay? That was a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. It was lovely. I'm glad I sent it this morning. I told Stephen to feel free to cut it down a little bit, but I'm glad he went through the whole thing. So let me ask you all. We've had other Trump references before here today, but are you tired of winning? Are you tired of winning? Are you tired of our tax breaks? Are you tired of peace with North Korea? Are you tired of Obamacare being stopped in its tracks? Are you tired of everything the president is doing? Are you tired of his tweets speaking directly to the American public so we know exactly what's on his mind? We're not. I'll tell you who is tired, though, the Democrats. They're desperate. They are absolutely desperate. The reason we have our president there now today, a Republican president, who Ted Cruz said he is a flashbang grenade thrown into D.C. by the forgotten men and women of America. The reason he's there is because all of you voted. It's because Michigan came out and voted. And I want to tell you, we cannot take any future victory for granted. As a matter of fact, it's fair to say that our vote is under threat. The Democrat opponent that we'll be facing, the SOS candidate that you choose in the convention on August 25th, is well-groomed. She's a Harvard lawyer. She was the youngest dean of a law school when she was dean appointed at Wayne State in the country. And she's been given this fantastic position of running an inner-city nonprofit, the Rise Corporation. And the most important thing you need to know is that she's a darling of the Soros Foundation. Now, about a month and a half ago, we were all invited to film at Citizen Detroit, which is an inner-city advocacy group that wanted to post videos of all the candidates. I invite you to my website or to my Facebook page to see what I had to say there, but I want to point this out more importantly, because we were the only two that went, myself and Jocelyn Benson, what she had to say. It's very clear that she's for every liberalization of voting that you can think of. It's very clear that her agenda is continuing this drumbeat of imaginary or heightened attention to any slight and accommodation of everything possible. She is the darling of the Soros Foundation, and if she wins, we can almost kiss some victories goodbye. That's going to be a big hit on us. Now, another thing I want to tell you is that Michigan, according to the Voter Integrity Project, is the state with the largest number of registered voters in excess of the eligible population. So we have removed a lot of people. And as Mary said a bit ago, Ruth Johnson has done a fantastic job. If she were running again, I don't think I know for sure I wouldn't be running. It wouldn't be much of a race. But we have a lot to do to fix our election system. Now, the job of the Secretary of State basically falls into three major categories: Chief Elections Officer, Chief Motor Vehicles Officer, and Keeper of the Great Seal, which implies a lot more than just holding a seal at the edge of your desk. In my background, I've managed large organizations. As Comptroller of the Navy, when I performed those duties, I managed an organization of 5,000 people worldwide and a budget of over $142 billion. When I ran Biometrics, which was basically an internal government startup, we took it from 28 million to 220 million in less than 2 years. And we established a technology throughout the Department of Defense. Believe it or not, before we came on board, the FBI used to provide the biometric search and match capability for the Department of Defense. I understand government management. I've even trained government management because anything I learn, I like to teach as a teacher. The most important thing we need to do, and the other candidates have captured this, is voting integrity. Because I'll tell you why, aside from races being swayed, if we don't, we probably won't have the luxury to do all the other cool things we want to do. We have to focus on voting integrity. And I have a set of solutions there that might be a little different from what you've heard from others. The count that I saw was 227,000 voters in excess of the eligible population in Michigan. And of the battleground states, we have by far the largest number. Imagine what getting that remaining number, that was the 2017 count, by the way. Imagine what getting that remaining number might do to elections, getting that remaining number off. Now, there's many ways to get at this, to chip at this, including the Social Security rolls, okay? Who's off Social Security? Well, let's take them off our payroll. But there's lots of other shenanigans that go along to feed that number. But the most common way that we register as voters is what? Somebody tell me. When you get your driver's license, right? Well, how about this? How about when your driver's license expires, let's let your voter registration expire too. Now, if you need to re-up and you're not driving anymore, or for some reason you're going to let that go, not the driving part, that's fine. I have a 25-year-old daughter that doesn't like to drive. We'll make it easy, appropriately easy, but let's let those registrations expire. If we never let them expire, we could have 152-year-old voters there, right? If the Social Security office doesn't catch them. So that's one. We have many the larger source of illicit voting is actually the absentee system, okay? Because it's possible right now to request, receive, fill out, and return and have a vote counted without ever presenting yourself as an absentee ballot. There's something we can do with biometrics to fix that. Right now, the clerk's offices have their procedures, and the general procedure is you visually verify those signatures, that the signature used to request was the signature used to return. Well, we could apply biometrics and say, let's compare that signature with whatever we have on file. Let's see how that matches the one that was used to request and how that matches the one that was used to return. It doesn't need to slow anybody down, but we can increase by orders of magnitude, I think at least 2 orders of magnitude, our certainty that the absentee ballots we're getting are legitimate absentee ballots. And if there's some sort of aberration or some reason we don't think it'll work, I mean, we don't think the signatures match, we don't have to invalidate somebody's vote. Just go and call them up and say, did you vote, Ms. McGillicuddy? Because we got your absentee ballot last Saturday. And if she says yes, then it's not a big deal. But this is a preventive measure. A third one on the voting side. Everybody has a voter card. That's not supposed to be an ID. It's supposed to be a document or piece of paper that says, yes, you registered. Okay? The reason we cannot require photo ID is because we'll get caught up in the courts. And the logic has always been that if it's something you have to pay for, whether it's a passport or a driver's license, if it's something you had to pay for, then it's effectively a poll tax to require that credential to vote. Well, we can get around that. Let's take that card that everybody gets, and it runs through a printer anyway, and put at a cost-effective rate, I don't care if it's black and white, put the picture that we have on file for that person on that card. Okay. Now when you show up to vote, it takes a different class of liar to show up with somebody else's picture, right? And it's free. It won't cost us a thing. As far as the chief motor vehicles officer, yes, we need to be, I believe we need to be just bigger, smarter, faster. I will not support any increases in existing fees, and I will remove the online user fees, because right now we charge, I believe, $3 for any online transaction. There's no reason we need to do that, because it's actually saving us money. Okay. But when I set up biometrics, we formed a group of about the same number of people here that were sent, they were all colonels and above, were sent to Washington, near the Pentagon, to Crystal City, and we locked them in a room for 2 weeks to make sure we all understood all of their biometrics needs and how to fill them, and also detangled all the overlaps. That's called the concept of operations. I propose to you that we can do a concept of operations with the Department of Motor Vehicles, especially how we handle all those auto-related transactions, and come up with something for the future, not from 1950 to now that's been tweaked, but for the future, that will maximize the use of technology and optimize the use of our space. The most important thing, though, is Keeper of the Great Seal. The Chief Notary Officer, you could think of it, the role in some way as that. And that has a lot to do with our certainty of contracts in the state, right? Assurance of contracts. That's what notaries do, right? They certify contracts. Two things we can do there that would have an immediate effect. Number one is we can implement a virtual notary, electronic notary. It's been piloted in a couple states, including Virginia, and it works with the right amount of encryption. Once we have that rolled out, you could basically gain a notary seal from home any time of day or night. Okay. The other thing I want to mention to you, and Senator Colbeck talked about this quite a bit, and we've had conversations about the topic, and that is our roads contracting. My first 8 years were spent as an engineer. 3 minutes, okay, I'll try to hurry. We are paying, if you talk to people who understand roads, I've surveyed as many as I can, we're paying between 3 and 8 times what we should be paying for our roads. Thank goodness the legislature passed the rule that you didn't have to pay prevailing wage anymore. That's going to help us. But we need to rethink our roads contracting. And in government, the most important thing is information. They've attempted to put into legislation all the information that goes along with roads contracting, so it would be much more open-ended. But why can't the Secretary of State create a database to store a voluntarily provided roads contracting information from all the contracting entities in the state to say who won that contract, what was the cost, what were the parameters, what were the specifications, what happened after it was delivered, and who was the lowest bidder and who was the highest bidder, so that we know that we're getting the best prices and the best quality. And if we have fantastic roads, because driving over here, let me tell you, sometimes it's a completely different experience than driving in some parts of eastern Michigan. We have a nice highway coming out here after Grand Rapids. I'd like to see more of those roads, not more of some of the roads that have been built poorly, have had even been torn up recently. Okay, so I'll tell you 3 things I will not do as your Secretary of State. I will not increase the budget for the existing duties of the SOS. I will not move away from paper ballots, and I will not issue driver's licenses outside of the law. I want to tell you 2 quick things here. My favorite presidents, Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan. I got 1 minute. Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan. And I love quotes. You know, I started out in engineering. I decided that the problems that we really need to work on are people problems and government problems, because the quality of government determines the fate of nations. We've moved around. When we were looking for a place after Obama came in and after being a Bush appointee, we wanted to be in a beautiful place where we could continue raising our children. We're entering college age, and Michigan State came knocking after a good amount of prayer and out of the blue. And we had turned down a few things. We took Michigan State. And I've lived a few places: Arizona, California, Washington State, D.C., Virginia, and here in my adult life. And Abraham Lincoln used to say, I'm just a long piece of driftwood when he would be asked to describe himself. But he always had a heart for service. And this is our home. Our youngest doesn't know any other home. I love Michigan. We've been here since 2011. And if that's good enough for Abe, that's good enough for me. I love Michigan, and I want to ask to serve you in the capacity of Secretary of State. Thank you.
Before we move to the questions and answers, a couple things. As you know, we've often said freedom isn't free. These are free and open to the public, but we still have costs and expenses, and Dan will be passing out the donation buckets for free will donation. If you like the things we do and like us to continue them, please be generous, make a donation. Also, at this point, if you have any questions for the Secretary of State candidates, jot them down. We'll collect them before we take a very short break for bathroom and snacks. And so then we can proceed right after a short break with Q&A. And at this point, I'd like to adjourn the meeting for about 30 seconds to make an endorsement. No. The ushers will collect them. Just hold up your questions, and we'll have the ushers collect them. So when you have your questions written down, just hold your card up in the air, and the ushers will pick them up, and we'll get them up here to the podium. I want to adjourn the meeting for like 30 seconds to make a quick endorsement, and I've never done it before, probably won't do it again. But we do have a candidate for governor that spoke to you tonight that is absolutely the person with the highest moral integrity of any candidate I've ever met. We've worked with Pat Colbeck over the last couple of years on many different educational forums, and he's the real deal. He's a great problem solver. He's a compassionate conservative. He's a solid Christian man that walks the talk. And we have a rare opportunity to send someone to Lansing that will not be beholden to donors and special interests and the bureaucracy. Pat will be beholden to the voters of Michigan, and he will do what's right, even if it's not popular. And the reason we know this is, as the old saying, that the best indicator of future performance is past performance. Pat has a track record as a two-term senator doing exactly what he told his constituency would do. How many elected officials do you know have actually done what they've promised to do? So I can't endorse as the president of this organization, so I'm adjourning briefly so I can make this endorsement, and then we'll reconvene. But I really did want to do that, and I'll follow up with a letter to the editor of the various papers, but I feel strongly that Pat is an exceptional candidate that we won't see his like again in our lifetimes. And I really urge people to get behind him, look up his website. I was trying to summarize it, and his stuff is so detailed. As an aerospace engineer, he's got detailed solutions to most of the issues that plague us in this state. And he's thought about it in depth. Most elected officials simply promise to, clean up the air and provide, apple pie or whatever. They don't go into the details because they don't have the details. Pat has the details. He is an aerospace engineer. He is a rocket scientist, and he's thought it through. So I strongly urge you to take a look at his candidacy. I'll be voting for him and urging my family and friends to do the same. And I just wanted to take a minute to endorse Pat Colbeck for governor. We'll now reconvene and then take a short break. Make sure you get some of Ann's, I saw some of the brownies Mike was eating, and if you've not been here before and you haven't had some of Ann's cooking, you're cheating yourself. Pop down and grab something to eat and something to drink. Come on back. Make sure you turn in your question cards first, and then, turn your cards in now to the ushers before you take a bathroom break or get a snack, so we can go through them and get ready for the next part, which will be a Q&A session with our Secretary of State candidates. So take a couple minutes. The bathrooms are out this hallway and right to your left, and the snacks are right through this door and to your left. So take a couple minutes, reconvene in about 5 minutes, and then we'll get into the question and answer period with the Secretary of State candidates. If you need a card, the ushers can give you a card. If you already got it, please turn it in. before we start again, I'll point out to you just I've got them. I've got them. I'll ask them real quick, because I know this. Do it real fast, because we want to get into the Q&A thing. I'll ask them right now. Thanks.
Because I will probably get going. So.
Okay, well, hey, thanks for coming.
Yeah, it was very informative. Thank you.
Yep, let's get the candidates up here, and we'll get the folks out of the foyer and the snack room, and we'll get rolling.
Should I be the rose?
You can be the rose, yes. Rose by any other name is still a rose, isn't it? Is it okay if I sit close? I'm not-
The rose that you were talking about?
Yeah, I know. I wrote a song about it.
You wrote a song about it? You come up
I'm
with
gonna put it out there pretty soon.
your website too. Actually, were you here when Colbeck spoke?
Yeah,
He
he's
probably
awesome.
wants that song.
Be out next week. Stanley, I like that tie.
Thank you. Well, you're a similar color.
Yes, I'm always looking for purple ties. They're very hard to find. That's your Easter tie, okay.
Gentleman made a comment about 227,000, something or other, more than something or other.
Yeah.
Who made it? Was that you?
Like everybody to come in from the foyer, and we're going to get started here in just a sec with the questions of the candidates. And if you just decided you want to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll get you a card and you can still fill it in. We don't want to let anybody's question go unanswered. And Dr. Kale, when you got the questions ready, get them on up. I just want to let you folks know that I was given an announcement here that the Colbeck camp will have a flash mob June 29th here in Holland from 4:30 to 6:30 at the northeast corner of River and Douglas Avenue. I think that's the same place in 2016 we had the Trump flash mob that was a lot of fun. Actually, it's more like a party and a picnic. You met a lot of neat people and you saw the opposition and they said all sorts of vile things, and they turned the corner, and the cop pulled them over and gave them a ticket. So it was just delightful. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. So if it's good weather, come on out. If it's bad weather, still come out. But it's a Colbeck flash mob, June 29th, just a couple days from now, 4:30 to 6:30 p.m., northeast corner of River and Douglas Avenue. Okay, this is the first question for the candidates, and the microphone is live, and all three of you can answer these questions if you choose. The first question is, can an illegal immigrant register to vote? Can an illegal immigrant register to vote? Whoever wants to tackle that first, go ahead.
I got it. Yes, they do register to vote. Maybe not knowingly, but it is illegal for them to register. What happens there in many communities, there's a language barrier with those people. By federal law, our tellers at Secretary of State, they have to ask people if they want to register to vote when they're renewing their driver's license. Many people do not, those with the language barrier, do not understand the language. When they, maybe nodding or something like that, they get registered to vote. And so this is not even for them knowing that they just registered to vote. There are some states that illegal, I believe, register knowingly, and that is being pushed most likely by liberal left and Democrats to increase their voters' participations in states like California and others. So, yes, they do register to vote. It's illegal for non-citizens to participate in our democratic process.
Okay, and here's do the other candidates want to respond to that also, or Is that sufficient? Okay.
Yeah, that is accurate, but I think it needs to be pointed out, too, that people will say, let's make it mandatory to show your citizenship. And that is not a law in place that is required. So myself, as the next Secretary of State, I do plan, and I do have already developed a legislative team in place in which we will begin addressing some of these items that we need to put into law to help us to facilitate and ensure that the election integrity is fair and honest, and the results are based on those that are citizens and those that are eligible voters here in the state of Michigan.
So if I can add to that just a little bit, Ruth Johnson will tell an anecdote of a non-citizen who registered to vote because she believes, and I have no reason to doubt, that they were asked several times, because the protocol is that the person at the counter is supposed to ask. They were asked several times, and they just kind of said, yes, well, you get offered something several times. I guess that means that's an indirect way of, some cultures that don't use the word no. Some cultures say after somebody asks you something several times, you kind of say yes. So I think we need to change the protocol, and if there is a legal reason to do something to support the change in the protocol, we would follow through with that. But we definitely do need to make sure we never register someone who is not a citizen. But it has to do with the protocol as much as some people will say that it's clerks that are trying to register. They're politically, responding to their political leanings. I don't know if that's true, but if we change the protocol, it should fix it.
And this next question was directed to one person, but I'm going to broaden it to everybody. Some comments were made during the presentations about hundreds of thousands more people voting than were registered to vote in different precincts and counties and areas. What accounts, in your best thinking, for this discrepancy between those people that voted and the much smaller number of actual registered voters?
I'll protect you. I'll protect you, don't worry.
Oh, the sign fall down?
Yeah, the sign. It's because it's hot in here and the tape drooped. So the numbers that I cited were from the Judicial Watch Election Integrity Project. And I've seen other numbers that are larger, but when I'm citing numbers, I tend to go with the more conservative numbers so as not to be accused of being hyperbolic. Fact is, we do have a couple dozen counties that have significantly more registered voters than eligible residents. So what accounts for that? We've been talking about voters not coming off the rolls, which we would fix by having that expire somehow. And I think driver's license, having it coincide with the driver's license, I think is a pretty good way. We might meet some legal challenge, and we'd have to address it. But the other thing is there are shenanigans. There are a lot of shenanigans. And one of the things that happens that I would like to also I think needs to be addressed legislatively is that if you have a Democrat or Republican area, pocket, let's say, or a county, some of us live in highly partisan counties, right? So, or talk about Detroit, which is where one party is kind of monolithic. There's no limit to what they can do. But there's other states where they drive an organization of the election offices so that you have two of one party and one of the other. So the party, one party is never absent. In other words, you always have at least two sets of eyes there from the two parties. And that is usually, like for example in Virginia, it coincides with the party of the governor's office. And that works very, very well, because the most important thing is being able to see things, having visibility and being able to stop things before they become a problem and before we have to get lawyers and go through courts to fix something that's already done, and maybe the candidate is already sworn in and the results are gone and we can't do anything about it anyway. So it is a problem, and I think it's as much shenanigans as oversight.
So when I spoke earlier, I gave accolades to Ruth Johnson and what she has done thus far, and she has done a tremendous job in cleaning up the voter files. We are very fortunate that she has been at the helm and leading this charge the last 8 years. So it's important that we continue that forward momentum, and my plan specifically where it says one citizen, one vote, that is a plan in which it identifies and moves us forward, not only doing the items that she's doing today. I indicated doing the Social Security match every day to ensure our voter roll is accurate and up to date. Also participating in ERIC, the interstate participation, where we remove those voters that are in multiple states beyond the interstate cross-check that she participates in today. There's many things on my plan, which I indicated earlier, also out on my website, that needs to be continuing to clean it up. Some it is technology-based, and some is just human computers and that type of tech.
Let me go back just quickly to previous question. A local clerk can register the people to vote as well. Local clerks at townships and cities. So it's not only Secretary of State. I register voters, whenever they come to my window. As far as removing people from the QVF, it requires extra resources, and not every community has those resources. I'll tell you what I'm doing as a clerk in Shelby Township. I have a person scanning through the newspaper, local newspaper, looking for obituaries. And when we come across that somebody died in Shelby Township, we flag him. We don't remove him, we put a flag that that person has to show some IDs when they go to vote. Not every community has the resources, folks. This is why the smaller communities, and this is a huge problem, those are the ones that have actually more people to register to vote than living there, because there's no one there to scan those newspapers, and we must have a proof, which is if somebody dies, somebody has to call me as a clerk. It's Mr. Clerk, can you please, my mother died or my grandfather died, can you please remove that person? I can't just check them off because I don't like somebody the way they look. I have to have a proof. So when I have that picture in a newspaper, obituary, that's my proof. I can actually flag that person, that person is deceased. That's one way to do it. Another way to do, multiple states, folks, it's very easy to do. When you go to Florida and get a ticket, driving on 100 miles an hour, you come back from your vacation, what happens? You go to your mailbox, where you find? You find a ticket follow you here to Michigan, isn't it? It's called reciprocal agreement between state. Why can't we have that when it comes to elections? When somebody moves to Ohio and Pennsylvania, why can we not have that state calling me in Michigan and say, hey, your resident just moved here, register to vote here, can you please remove him there? Reciprocal agreement. It's very simple because there's no revenues coming in when it comes to voting. When it comes to tickets, the government will collect huge revenues and fines. When it comes to, that's why they have reciprocal agreement. Same thing when you go to Canada or Mexico. We have reciprocal agreement with those countries as well. That's what's going on, folks. There's no money involved when it comes to elections. Who cares, right? Tell me. That's right. So that's what's going on. Let's be honest, folks. Let's be honest. This is what's going on. Thanks.
This one is for all three candidates, especially in light of all the concerns about hacking of the election and so forth. Can electronic online voting be secure? And I believe some states in the U.S. do that, and this question relates to that. Can electronic online voting be secure?
Well, I'll be all over this. Yeah. Absolutely not. As long as I am Secretary of State, we will remain paper ballot. My CPA background, just in the auditing background, we need those documents to produce and reconcile and ensure that the election results are fair. And the ballots will remain paper for at least the lifetime of my legacy as Secretary of State for those 8 years.
So I agree with Mary. Nothing electronic is secure. If we've shown anything in the last 15 years, but I think over a longer period, is that we cannot keep any secret, and anything that's digitized becomes susceptible to be captured or hacked. Unless you have an air gap, and I've even heard of air gap exceptions if you run wires too close to each other. Having said that, I pointed out that one of the things I won't go away from is paper ballots so that we can verify things. What was brought up earlier is what DHS declared under Jay Johnson in the Obama administration, that they declared elections infrastructure as critical infrastructure. I can't wait for our president to reverse that declaration. I think they might be waiting for this Russia haze to clear, this nonsense about Russia, but I don't buy into any of that. You can't identify a single vote that was hacked, moved, or otherwise obfuscated by the Russian government. And if we do our jobs, that won't be an issue. We don't need to be running around like Chicken Little, like Jay Johnson was when he made that declaration. It was scary to think that the federal government begins, the camel's nose under the tent, begins to think they control our election infrastructure. Can you imagine that? If they did it with their own standards, their own Common Core for elections, and said, this is how you do it, and I don't care how dumb it is, you're doing it our way. No, we've got to move away from that as soon as possible.
Voting electronically would just invite another form of corruption. I am totally against it. We have enough venues right now for crooks to falsify our elections in some communities. 5 states don't have paper ballots. And I think I know who they are, but it's 5 states. That means if there's a recount or hacking, there's no way they can recount their ballots, folks. That's scary stuff. It's that like elections, there were attempts in 21 states to hack election systems. Now, attempts, that doesn't mean they were able to do that. Michigan was, thank God, not one of them. But absolutely not. No electronic voting. That's what Democrats want, so they have another form of cheating and falsifying elections. And we cannot make it easy for them to do that. Thanks.
Next question. It's directed to Mr. Guzman, but I think I'll open up to everybody. Would your plank of renewing one's voter registration every 5 years go against, and I don't know which case it is, a recent Supreme Court case? Why or why not? And would this not unfairly impact military voters? I'll read it again. Would your plank of renewing your voter registration every 5 years go against a Supreme Court case of some kind? And would it unfairly impact military voters?
So if there's a legal reason that we need to get around, there's multiple ways to address the legal considerations. Now, the convenience issue is another issue. I think if we have to make special accommodation for veterans, we should. If we have to make special accommodation for senior citizens because they might cease driving, we should. So there's ways around it, but by and large, the bulk of the voters should have, I think, their registration expire. Otherwise, we're chasing these hundreds of thousands of votes that are susceptible to capture by the other side. So I think the closer we can be to accurate is the best way to go. The other thing you can do, think about this, without necessarily explicitly deregistering someone, is have last contact. Have a marker that says the last time you voted, or the last time you you registered. So we know that a voter registration isn't 80 years old, or older than it should be. So we know what to pay more attention to. But what we need to do is think about a combination of methods that are more preventive than after the fact and punitive, so that we prevent people from cheating on voting and not having to chase them afterward. Along the lines of, I'll just stick to this question and we'll rather than mix it up.
So part of my solution provides how we're going to ensure that the elections are fair and the outcome. Can you restate that question again?
Yeah, let me pull it out here. It was, would your plank of renewing your voter registration every 5 years go against the recent Supreme Court case? And would this unfairly impact military voters?
So first and foremost, I think it's imperative. I have addressed the veterans, and we're going to have a veteran advocate that's dedicated to that, to make sure that they are voted each and every time. But to have the expiration of voter registration, that is not part of my plan, and that goes into the definement of ensuring that we take it as a privilege and an honor, and we're able to vote and deliver that vote in a respectable way. There's many individuals that don't have access to get to the Secretary of State's office, and that would not be part of my plan. Now, as far as it being counterproductive in the state courts, I don't know. But I do know for sure that part of my plan is one citizen, one vote. It shows how we're going to keep those files clean. And it also shows that we in the state of Michigan, it's a federal mandate that every 2 cycles that we in the state of Michigan, every 2 federal cycles, which is a total of 4 years, if that individual has not voted, we can send a notice off to them and remove them from the file if they don't come forward to let us know that they're no longer in the state. So there's a case in Ohio, and we can talk about that and take up that time, but that's not valuable at this point. Here in the state of Michigan, after 2 federal cycles, we can remove them after we correspond out to them and advise that you're no longer here. And in those cases, it just continues cleaning up the voter files. And as I have applauded Ruth, and she's done a fabulous job, we will continue that forward momentum and honoring those federal laws that are in place.
I've got one more question, but I think I'm going to roll
Can
it
I-
right. Oh, go ahead.
Can I say?
Sure, go ahead.
I would adopt Ohio model. Ohio just won a case in Supreme Court, folks. Why can't we adopt this in Michigan? And I would not hesitate to adopt that particular case. And it goes like this. In 2 years, if you don't vote, the Secretary of State sends you a letter, registered letter, requesting to identify yourself that you are who you are, you live there, and you are alive. After 4 years, if we don't hear from you, you are off the rolls, folks. That's the Ohio model. Ohio has been removing people from their roles over and over. There was a challenge. They took it to Supreme Court. Somebody had enough guts, took it all the way to Supreme Court, and guess what happened 2 weeks ago? Supreme Court ruled in their favor. That will automatically eliminate dead people voting after 4 years, people voting in multiple states. And I would not hesitate for a minute to implement that in Michigan. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And let those liberal Democrats cry uncle. I don't care. Fair is fair. If we don't clean up our election system, our Republicans will never win anything again in close elections, folks. I know it. I see it every day. I know how it can be fixed and manipulated. There are a lot of great clerks out there. There's a lot of good clerks, county clerks, local clerks, but there are also connivers and either incompetent or corrupted individuals running elections. We know who they are. As Secretary of State, I would move in very quickly and take oversight of those elections and see what the heck happened on Election Day. As Secretary of State, I can't run elections, but I have oversight of those elections. And I would not be afraid to use my power as Secretary of State to move in there and see what the heck happened in that election. Now, this would be only communities that I know that would have problems. Like I said, many great clerks. Get closer. You can. There are many great clerks out there, and they're doing a heck of a job. But we cannot reward incompetence and fraud. It cannot happen. Under my watch as Secretary of State, guarantee it won't happen. Thank you.
I've often been tempted to vote often and early like my relatives in Chicago, but I live in Ottawa County and Justin is just too good to let that happen. So I guess I'll never achieve that dream of voting often and early for my favorite candidates. I guess I'll have to move to Cook County or maybe Detroit, where I can enjoy that privilege. We're running a little bit over, so I'm going to take this last question and ask each candidate to roll this into your last 2-minute closing statement. And the question is, each candidate name 3 specific things they do to prevent election irregularities. And each one of you answer that and then roll it into your closing statement and keep it brief because we're already about 5 minutes over. And start in any order you would like.
Go ahead. Ladies first.
I didn't really say that, but thank you for having that respect for me. I think I was loud and clear, and it's clear for today as we listen to all the candidates. My plan of one citizen, one vote was very clear with real solutions and a real plan on how we plan on delivering and ensuring that the integrity of the vote, the protection of the vulnerability of the information is there, and that we ensure that we have fair election outcomes. Other portions of my plan in regards to respecting your time in line and all those things that are important to us and bringing the modern day technology to the office. But I just want to hit on something here that Stan Grotz mentioned. We, as Secretary of State, cannot go in there and take control over the clerks. We need laws in place to do that. We, as the Secretary of State, cannot go in there and do what Ohio can do without the laws. That's why I have a legislative team that we will have in place to push some of these laws, to ensure that the integrity of the election is protected and the fairness, and each and every one of you know that the outcomes are accurate. I, as your next Secretary of State, assure you that I will deliver on the things that are necessary to continue the state moving forward, continue on what our great Secretary of States, Candace Miller, Terry Lynn Land, and Ruth Johnson has done, particularly Ruth Johnson in cleaning up these voter files. But we are up against Jocelyn Benson and a radical left agenda and George Soros. We need the best, the strongest candidate to go up against Jocelyn Benson. Candace Miller, in her endorsement, has stated, and it's very specific, go out on my website, that Mary Treater Lang is the only candidate that can beat Jocelyn Benson in November. I ask for each of you for your vote as precinct delegates, if you are, at the state convention on August 25th. And I ask for your vote again in November. And you will be proud to have me as your next Secretary of State, and I would be honored to deliver that to each and every one of you. And I'm doing it because I'm passionate, and I'm doing it because it means the future of our great state and remaining a healthy state where our families, friends, and Michiganders can return to this state and make a living. Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Have a wonderful evening. And by the way, the 4th of July is next week. God bless you all in your travels, and enjoy this great America. Thank you, President Trump, for being at the helm.
Drive home safely. Wait, Mary, it's not over yet.
Thanks, Mary. Next.
Okay. So, a couple things. I understand endorsements, and they have value. But the reason we're here today is to help you make your own decisions. To not be coerced. You're the core of the party. You are the people who carry the conscience of the party and carry forward the platform. You're not about to be coerced. You need to be convinced. I've reached out to Terry Lynn Land and Candace Miller. They won't speak to me. How do they know that I'm not the best Secretary of State? That doesn't mean as much to me. This job is too important to hand it over to people over friendships or perceived characteristics that the next Secretary of State has to have. Yes, I'm different. We're in a different time. We have never had an Hispanic male. I'd like to be the first Hispanic male voted in statewide since George Romney. Because George Romney was born in Mexico originally, right? But this job is way too important. We need to have the person who has experience, not just in one aspect, but in all aspects of the management of this organization, and understands the impact of all three major areas on the running of the state. My aim is to put Michigan on top. We were the richest state in the country 100 years ago. And we can reclaim that because we still have all of those things that made that possible. We are going to be a job state. We're a natural resources state. We are the kingpin of the Midwest. We're a trade state. And the Secretary of State, in helping manage our resources effectively, giving the light of day to our contracting information, and also in promoting more transparency in government, will make Michigan the best place to be in the country. And that's my aim, and that's my promise to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. Stan.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for your time. Steve, thank you very much for having us. This is great. Folks, the decision is in your hand. Don't base your decision on gender, on national origin, on age, on geography. I ask you to base your decision on the person that is most qualified for the job. And I know I'm that person. To clarify, Mary, I never said we're going to take over elections of any communities. I said we're going to take oversight. That means audits. That means audits. As Secretary of State, you ask your clerk, he'll tell you. Those audits are going on right now. I would double or triple that amount. If there's a problem in the community, I would be there with my staff immediately the next day, secure the boxes, and do the audits. And I would know within 2-3 days what the heck happened in that community. So again, it all comes to experience. If we're going to start choosing candidates based on gender, we know what happened to Democrats and Hillary Clinton, right? They had to have a woman. Yes, we have to support women. Yes, in my lifetime, I always support female candidates, but it has to be the right one with experience. Simple as that. Folks, one person, one vote. I put this together a year and a half ago. And I am so honored that my opponent is now coming around to my plan. Look at that plan, security, optimization, stability. That was my opponent's plan. Look at my card. How many of you make appointments to Secretary of State so you won't wait in line? Yeah, the political hacks here. Folks, technology alone, oh, you're not a political, I apologize. You're not a hack. You may be. Folks, technology alone will not solve the problem. Will not solve the problem of long lines at Secretary of State. You make appointment. A lot of the older folks, they still want to go and do the business in person, Secretary of State. They don't have computers. They don't know how to use that technology. We should give them every opportunity to do that. One way to cut the lines is increase your driver's license renewal from 4 years to 6 years. That will cut the line immediately by 50% at the Secretary of State. You renew it by mail or fax, I'm giving you 12 years. You won't have to see me for 12 years. Go enjoy the party, a birthday with your wife or your spouse and come back in 12 years. We'll see you. It's a concept. It's an idea. Why not? Why not implement it? If you make that appointment, and I'm almost done, if you make this appointment, what my opponent is suggesting, you made an appointment, the rest of the people did not make the appointment. You go in because you secure your time. Congratulations. Very good. Very good. What does it do to everybody else here? Waiting in that room. Makes them mad. First of all, he cuts in front. Second, it pushes everybody down. That technology will work if everybody uses that technology. Everybody makes appointments. But if you start picking and choosing, folks, it's not going to work. Only 6% of people renewing, doing business, renewing, whatever, accounts for 6% of business done with Secretary of State. We have to start thinking with innovative ideas. We have to start coming up with some other ideas that maybe were not implemented yet. And we'll do it. We'll do it, but don't let anybody sell you that technology will solve everything. It won't. Let me just address one more thing and I'm done. When the absentee ballots come back, Mr. Guzman, we do check electronically signatures. It's now in progress. You said that you would yeah, absolutely. You can rebut. Yeah, I think you can, absolutely. All right, so when the ballots come back, we scan the signature, comes up on the screen, so we checking those signatures. The only thing can happen if it's an incompetent clerk or fraudulent clerk, they can just let it go, overlook at that signature. But good clerks will always catch it. Ask your clerk later on. We capture electronic signatures. We do check it against the ballots coming in. Now it's your rebuttal.
Okay, Stan went over, so I'm going to give Joe and Mary another minute and a half apiece.
Okay, so not all clerks use electronic signature recognition, and just because you capture the signature doesn't mean you're electronically comparing the signatures. So what I was talking about was a biometric that says there's certain patterns in the way you write that can be picked up by biometrics, and some of them are subtle. You can look at a signature that looks exactly like another signature, but the way the sweeps happen and the way the line comes off and all that will tell you whether it's authentic or not. Okay, so I was referring to using something more than just the capturing of the signature. I don't want to get into directly attacking other candidates. And by the way, I also want to make sure because I think it was interpreted that I was attacking Mary's gender, and I wasn't attacking Mary's gender. I'm just saying that we have had very successful secretaries of state, and we have recommendations from those past successful secretaries of state, and I haven't spoken with them. That's all I was saying. I wasn't attacking Mary at all. But thank you for the time to rebut, and I'll give Mary the mic now.
Hi, I think all of you need to be clear. If you're not, I would think us as candidates would understand what my time is all about. It's currently in 40 of the 131 locations. Ruth Johnson created it. It's respecting your time in line. The point behind it is that you set your appointment, and it allows you to go and run errands. You can go grocery shopping, drop the kids off at school, whatever the facts are, but you'll be notified on your cell phone when your time is available. It'll go, you got 5 more minutes, you got 10 more minutes, whatever it is. But it was out of the box thinking, and that's truly what you're gonna get out of me, just like you got with President Trump. I'm a businesswoman. I told you how I was innovative with the computer security well before it was a household word. I will think out of the box and bring that creativity. When we talk about how we're gonna have solutions, I have solutions. I have a plan, and I have solutions. And my plan, one citizen, one vote, why Mr. Grott was talking, I couldn't even see it on his thing here. This one citizen, one vote has been with me for the last 10 months. It's no different. It's part of my security, the optimization, and stability. So I just want to be clear on that. And I don't need to be stealing things to be successful in life. I am here to drive forward the state of Michigan, utilizing the skills that I have with a real plan. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
I'd like to thank all the candidates for coming out and spending their time with us and being passionate about their desire. Let's give them a round of applause. And I know they'll stick around a little bit as they gather their stuff. Candidates, make sure you get all your signs and stuff out of Pastor Bart's church. And I need about 4 guys to get those tables out of the lobby once the stuff is cleared off and back in the back room so we can restore the church to pristine condition. I'd like to thank Justin for coming and giving us a little brief overview of what our county clerk does. And we didn't even get into the new voting machines you're buying, which are going to be state-of-the-art, and we'll give you a chance to come and explain that in more detail, but we're in good hands in Ottawa County because of Justin and his staff, and I don't worry about the Russians hacking into Ottawa County. It just ain't going to happen. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being so patient. And again, thanks to the candidates for coming out and really giving a passionate explanation of what they're about and what they'll do if they're elected. And please check into their materials on the table. Didn't do it alone. There's a whole bunch of people to thank that help with all this. But thank you for all our volunteers, and we need 3 or 4 guys to get those tables cleared and back to the back room. And sorry about the sign falling on you, Mary. I think probably Maxine Waters had something to do with it. Probably she sold us the tape. I suspect that Annie Maxine was involved somehow.